Hey yo, and welcome. So we'll actually be building this kind of portfolio application, and the point of it is to showcase to you guys a couple of things, right? And it has some cool features, I would say, and some relevant sections, right? So I'm just going to okay. So this is what we'll be building, and yeah, so we have the navbar, and we have the hero section. So when you scroll down, it's going to obviously move. And you can see this little component we have fixed on top that keeps track of our scroll Y position. And that way we can be able to know, oh, where are we on the page and how far we've come. So this is the about me. You have this section. So this is the services. This is my project. So my project can basically just, tap through all of this. This with tabs, by the way. Scroll down, we have the newsletter, and finally we have the footer. So now what we're going to do is to check the mobile version of it. I'm going to click on the inspect and have the mobile. So I'm going to close this out. Oh no. So I'm going to inspect this again and do that. Okay, that's good. I'm going to dock this out. Okay, good. So this is the mobile version of it. And when I scroll, you see the progress still appears on the mobile as well. So everything is coming in as expected all the way to the end. And also, let's try out our navbar. So you can see the navbar is coming in as expected. All right, so let's get started on this. So the very first thing we do is we can actually go to the repo link, right? And also you want to clone the starter branch. We already know the command for cloning. You can just copy the HTTPS from here. Go to any terminal of choice you have, and you want to run the git clone command, git clone, then you paste in the link, right? So let's go back. Oops, paste in the link here. So you just hit enter. This is what you do. I've already cloned it on my end, so I will not be doing this. So when you don't clone, you're going to see a repository setup like this. And the first thing you do is to try to install your dependencies by running npm install. Okay, you can actually run npm install all your developmental dependencies. So I've done this so it won't waste much time. So I'm just going to dive into the other areas so we can actually start proper development. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to run npm run dev. npm run dev. So this is going to start up the developmental server, and let's make sure that we don't have any terminal. Just close that out. So we obviously just have one. So wait a moment for it to run. And yeah, when it's done, it's just going to give us like a link or something similar. Right. And yeah, so there we go. You can click on this. Okay, so I think it's already loading behind the scene. And we're just going to give it a while for it to compile. And yeah, we should be good to go. Just a little moment, and should be up and running. Right. So while it's actually still loading, we can go to the Acture project we are building. We are actually building a kind of a portfolio website, which is fine. And the very first things we normally do is to set up our color schemes. Right. So this is the entire project. So we actually be doing some sort of cool animation here with Figma motion and stuff like that. Right, and yeah, so it's still loading. So let's grab our primary color. This, by the way, would be our primary color. Let's have it selected. Let's have this button selected. This is it. Let's go into the code, go to Tailwind config.js. Let me improve the font of this a bit. Close this out. So we already have this is what you see when it's done loading. Good. Right, so once we have the primary color, you want to go to in the extend block. You can actually just create colors here. Right, so don't include a comma here. And the first one there is actually the primary color. So we add ash before it. And yeah, there we go. I don't know, this is actually a black color, by the way. Okay, so also with that, these are just like generic colors. And so I think the only relevant thing we need here is like the actual primary color. The rest are actually black, so which is very easy. So we can just stick with this. So first of all, we're going to actually build all of this into different components, and the way we do that, originally is to go to source. Components, we already have lots of them there. So instead of component, I'm going to create a new folder called sections. This is where we'll actually be including all our sections, right? So, and yeah, so in this section, we're going to like create all the relevant sections. So as you can see here, we can call the first one the hero section. Yeah, so let's do that. We're going to create a new file, hero section. So let's fill that up real quick. And then about me section right here. Okay, so we have the services section. Okay, and yeah, we have my project section. And we have the testimonial section. Right, and also we have the newsletter section and then the footer. Newsletter section. And obviously we have the footer. Okay, so that's actually the entire app, and yeah, good for us, right? So because we can actually go to the page and try to arrange them in order, right? So go to app, go to your page. We're just going to close out the rest, close others, right? So I'm going to remove all of this. We're going to do main. So the very first component we have is the navbar, right? So let's do navbar. This is already pre-built. So when you clone from the starter, you should be able to have that component. And then we have the hero section, right? So, and then we have the about me. So we have the services. So we have my projects. We have testimonial. And then we have the newsletter. Finally, we should be able to have our footer section. Yeah, so that in summary is the entire architecture of this particular application. You can see that we just have them all, imported in, and when you go in here, you're going to see all of them coming in as expected, right? So the very next stage is for us to actually, export our assets so that we can be able to, play with these assets later on. So the first one here is the logo. So I'm going to, select this, right, and click on the export button right here and try to export this logo. So this will be our logo. I'm just going to click on there, right? So let me delete the ones that are not relevant. This is our logo. Good, it's already renamed. This is an image, right? So I'm going to select that. So we have a shape and then an image here. So we have to group them. Do Ctrl G on your keyboard to group them all together. And let's preview them again. You can see that everything is coming in as expected. So you want to basically just export this. So hero image, I'm going to rename this to hero image. So come in here and you want to do hero image. So we'll go back and let's see other thing that we might need. These are actually the social icons. So I think this is actually about me image. So I'm just going to make sure I select this. Sorry about that. select this, everything here actually. Okay, Ctrl G, export this. This is going to be about me image. Okay, good. So now we have social media icons here. So let's grab each of them. So select the first one, go to export this. It's going to be the freaking Facebook here. And just say F. So this pattern will be a little bit different, right? So we already know what we're building. And it's a way for you to basically showcase what you have, basically, right? And yeah, so I'm going to start this off by actually mentioning, one of, the subscribers reached out and the question was, how do I actually go about building these things from scratch? So I'm going to walk you guys through the entire process of, basically what I do, from the get-go, so that you have a basic understanding of how the application comes into the picture, right? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to first off showcase what we have currently. So I'm going to scroll down and you're going to see different sections that we have right here. And when you scroll up back, and you can notice this little stuff on top, that was actually done with Figma motion using the spring effect, right? And also we have things like this. So now I'm going to go to the Acture architecture real quick. So whenever I start off building a new thing or a new project from scratch, what I normally do is I come to this platform. I basically have this structure, and the way the structure works is I have, a kind of, setup, right? So this is my tree layout for every project I work on. It's always the same pattern, and depending on the team you join, many a time you have the structure that your team basically follow. So, for me, this is what I normally do. We have the app folder, right? And then we have the component, right? So when I say the app folder, what the app folder basically does, it's very simple, right? So this is the way we have it is actually based off of the app router. So I'm going to take that off real quick. And the app will contain, everything, route that supports your application, right? So everything within the app directory is officially a route. So that's why we're leveraging the Next.js14 app routing, functionality, right? So everything you have within the app folder is a route, and having that at the back of your mind, you're rest assured that whatever you put within there is an official route. So this should not contain components. I think this is the thing I see most people get wrong for the most part. You should not add component within the app, directory. So, but what you could do is that you can take those components and put it within the components folder. That's what the components folder is for, right? So, the component folder is actually, the way I divide it, I actually just break it down into cards, common, and sections, right? Also UI. So UI is actually something I will explain later on, right? So now we have the common. The common folder is, this is basically where you put in all the components you'll be reusing throughout the lifecycle of your application, right? So you might actually have a very huge application where you have maybe the actual overview page, you have the dashboard, and so on. So anything that is actually reused amongst like different pages is best to be kept in common. Some people call this shared, right? So it just depends on how you want to do it, but I just refer it as common components. Right, so this is the structure currently. This project we're working on. This is the structure. We have the header, we have the main button, we have the nav bar. Right, so these are actually the common component we'll be sharing, basically. Right, so you might actually be wondering how I actually came across this tree structure. I think I'll just show you guys that so it's easy for you guys to follow as well. I'm going to open up a new terminal here, and in this new terminal, I'm just going to do the target is the source directory. I'm going to do cd src and just run the tree command. So the tree command is going to give you the initial structuring of your actual application. So this is the way it's structured. We have the cards, we have the common, the sections, and the UI. All right, so back to what I was explaining. The common is already explained, is where you put in your shared components. And then we have the sections, right? So going back here, you see that all of these are different sections. This one, the first one you see here, this is the hero, right? This is the about me section. This is the services section. This is the my project section, and so on, right? So this is what you basically include in sections. So every page is broken down into different sections depending on the page, right? So each of these sections can actually use some sort of shared components, right? And other components if need be. So this is actually the initial structuring. And from the project we are working on, we have a couple of the about me section, we have the footer section, the hero, the my project, newsletter, as well as the services. So in summary, we have a total of 6 different sections here. And I normally just take my time to explain this stuff because I think, a lot of people get it wrong, especially when naming the actual files. So the file name is actually a convention right here, right? So the way you name your file, you should always include, the actual directory name as a suffix, right? So now what do I mean by that? So for example, I can actually come in here and say, okay, you know what? I want to add a new component part, and this place probably have a login form or something. I'm going to call this forms, right? And that is good enough, right? Either you call it forms or form, right? Depends on how you want to do it. So now say I have a login form. So I'm going to have login form.tsx. So this form part that I'm surfacing this actual file name with, gives a better clarity of what should be there, right? So that means anywhere you see this, you already know that it's a form. It's easy to easily access. So this is actually how you walk across all of this, and it's very easy when you get used to it. Okay, so now sections, and then we have the cards. So cards are actually very common, right? So let me show you a practical example of a card. This is a card, right? This is a card, and this too should be a card, right? So in this project, this was actually like tagged as the project card, while this on the other hand is the service card, right? So you might actually ask, what is a card, right? So card is basically what is being used most of the time within a section, and it's actually reused for the most part. So you can see that this actually have the same semantics as this, so also with this, and so on. So it's good for you to break this into a smaller card, right? Basically have that card structure so that you can be able to reuse them in your loop, right? So I think that answers it. Okay, so and also going back there real quick, and also you basically just include this wherever you want to use it. So this is actually part of cards. So I think the interesting part is the UI. So officially, what we normally do in most of our projects is that we leverage the Shadcn library, and the way it works is it's a non-component library. By non-component library, it means that you don't basically need to install the entire library to use a single package, right? So you can actually just install a single package and use that package specifically. So this is why it's important. I open this up now. So if, for example, using some sort of key or core components like the alert dialog, avatar, badge, and so on. So all you basically need to do, is to install this little badge and use that badge alone, right? So by default, when you install anything within your React or Next application, they go into the UI folder, right? So this UI is auto-generated when you're setting up Shadcn for the first time. It's going to go into that UI folder. So most of the time, you need to customize some of the inputs or components you install, right? So for example, I think I have tabs component. This is a tabs component. You can see I made some modifications here, by setting the active state to BG primary. So this is because I have it here and I can be able to modify it, to suit, the brand color of the actual project, right? So I think this is the way to go. And any singular project you basically install within your application can be found within the UI folder. So any Shadcn related components you install will be found there. Okay, so some other thing I would like to point out that might not be actually obvious for the most part is the way you basically, undo your dependencies, right? So sometimes I think this is actually a very bad practice that I've seen, and I needed to point it out. So let's put this in the red. So now we have a couple of practices, and one of them is the use of dev dependencies. So this use, actually, I just put the wrong use. Okay, so I think this is more of an actual bad practice, in the sense that what happens for the most part here is that developers don't really care about why they are installing this package and why they're actually doing this or installing it as a dev dependencies. There's actually a big difference between an actual dependencies and a development dependencies, right? So actual dependencies means, oh, I can just npm install you. I'm gonna go here, npm install actual dep. This is an example of an actual dependency installation, right? So, but now what could actually go wrong? I think I can just do the text. Okay, that's good. I have to select it so I can move it, right? So, and one other thing is the safe flag, right? So you can do npm stir dependency, right? So now the problem with doing it this way, I think what happens is most of the time when you go to npm to install your packages and you see they just do this for you by default and you just copy it and paste it in. That is wrong. You basically need to ask a question yourself the question, why is it done that way? Right. So dev dependencies are actually dependencies that is not based off of the business logic of your application, right? So it's just dependencies that is responsible for the developmental phase of it, right? So if I'm developing and need some sort of some sort of formatter or something, I can just install DataFNS as a dev dependencies, right? So this means that this dependency does not really relate to the actual application or the business logic of the actual application, but it is needed to basically perform some developmental refactoring, right? Or some formatting or whatever. So this is how you basically you try to, resolve this out. So in order not to drag this too much, I'm just going to go over to the actual implementation of what we have. And as you know, you basically have to set up your project. And the way you do that is you can always go here, which I've shown before, and you go to your source and go to your app and your page. This is what we are going to do, right? So now I've actually made some changes here, right, already. And the changes I've made here, it's very straightforward, and I don't think I put it here. Okay, so now it follows a similar pattern, and we're using Figma motion to basically maintain how we play around with this. And if you notice, when I put this side by side, we are using this use spring from Figma motion to basically, achieve this effect. So you can see when we scroll down, we are actually keeping track of the Y positioning, the scroll position. So when you scroll, it moves. And it doesn't just move, it moves in a scrollable manner, right? So there's in a spring manner. So you can actually notice that there. So this is something that is only relevant right here. So I'm going to open that up. So you can see we're using this to basically control that, right? So the use spring takes in the stiffness, the damping, and the rest delta. So I think you can basically just check out the documentation on how the use spring works. It's completely very straightforward. Let's do that. Figma motion. Yeah, so I think you can see like relevant use of it, and you can always come to the config part of it, and you can say the stiffness, the damping, and so on, right? So Let me open this up. Okay, there we go with the spring. Okay, so yeah, so you can see the damping right here. So this is the strength of the opposing force. If set to 0, spring will oscillate indefinitely, set to 10 by default. So now, why it's relevant, why you need to basically understand how this flow work is many a time you might not actually get the intended effect, right? You can see when you scroll for the first time, it moves in a very spring-like manner, right? So it doesn't just move, but it moves, in a spring manner. So I think that's how I can put it. So yeah, we have other one like stiffness, on how stiff do you want it to be, and so on. So let's play around with this stiffness. I'm going to scroll here. I'm going to go here and change this to 100, stiffness to 100. I'm going to refresh this. Okay, you can see that it's more springy than before, right? But what if we take this to maybe 0.5? Okay, you can see that it becomes way slower and it takes longer amount of time for it to get to the destination point, right? So this is actually a problem. So this is how you basically play around with your stiffness. So if you just want it to be cool, so I think on the average, I just set 50, for it to have that spring-like effect. And also we have the damping, right? So I'm going to come in here and obviously explain this part, right? So damping is what I explained before, right? So it just deals with the strength of the opposing force, basically. So I think you guys can actually check out the rest of the parameters. There are more to this if you want to add it. Just check out the docs and add more of the spring options. Okay, so basically what we'll actually be building, what I've done was to build out this particular setup already from scratch. And why I'm doing this is for us not to worry too much about the technical, implementation of it, for us to save time. And it's always very easy for us to go through it and go over each of the component one bit at a time. So the first thing we have here is the navbar. So you open it up, and when this is okay, I'm going to take this off from there. So this is basic implementation of the navigation. So here you can see we have the home, we have the about, we have the services, project testimonials, and I think contact. Right, I don't think there's testimonial. I can as well just take that off. And also take that off in the mobile part. So the navigation basically has a kind of a desktop setup and at the same time a mobile setup. The desktop setup is only available for widescreen users, but for the mobile, you basically just need to use a small device and it's highly responsive. You get the mobile setup. So this is the way we are doing it, and every project you basically clone from the startup branch already have this pre-built, so it's straightforward for you to go ahead with it. All right, so we have the desktop, and I'm just going to come here and show you the mobile part. So this is the mobile part, and it's like this, right? So it's very easy. We have the little hamburger by the side. This little hamburger here, when you click on it, you basically have all your different options, right? So this is what the X is doing, and when you do the toggle menu, it triggers. Okay, so this is actually directly straightforward and not really the point of the tutorial. So I'm going to go to the hero section so we can go through them one bit at a time. So I'm going to remove this. Okay, so let's say, so what we are doing here is basically very simple. I'm going to make this a little bit wider. So I think the other question I was asked is, how do I make this component very responsive? Okay, I think the answer to that is I use Tailwind a lot and I use Flex, right? So you can use a combination of Flex and Grid to make your layout extremely responsive, right? So you can just, in a parent container, you can just define some sort of Flex properties. And I just always find this as a convention, right? So I have Flex column. So that means this will apply to a mobile device. But when you go to a medium device, I want to make it a row format. So it's always flex column, medium flex row for me, right? And that always makes it very responsive for the most part. And it's very easy for you to do. So basically have the left part where we have this part. I am Mohammed Amir, UI UX designer, and so on. And on the right part, we have this image of that guy. So right here, we're actually using, I think we're using motion graphics to do that. Okay, well, I think I took that off. Yes, I'm just going to take that off. Not really, not necessary at this point. So we have the images there, and okay, so there we go. So that should give us a very good understanding of how you set this up, right? So it's just straightforward. You have it there. And when I show you the mobile version, so you have a setup similar to this, right? So you have this and it's broken down to the next line. So I was able to achieve that. So you can see we have the flex column by default. This is responsible for breaking this layout down to the other column, right? So when I remove this, now, you're going to see it's going to become irresponsive, right? So you're still having it in the row format, and that is a big problem, right? So it's always nice for you to include it there as the initial layout, right? And yeah, so ideally, this is how you go about, basically setting it up when you have the hero, and then you have to move on to the other section. So the other section here is the about me section. You might want to ask, what does this do and how does it work? It works similarly the same as the hero, right? So it's going to open it up and so you guys can see. So first of all, we have the image, and then we basically have the setup. So now I think for me to make it very easy, so you guys grab the idea of how all of this works. So I'm just going to rename this. Let me rename this to responsive layout. Oops, if I could spell. So this is responsive layout. Okay, so normally what happens is by default, you're going to have some blocks, right? So let's say you have a singular row. So this row should contain maybe like 2 items, right? So I'm just going to duplicate that and have this. So I have this as row 1. So I have this as row 2. Right, so now you get an idea of how this works. So by default, when you specify flex, so it's flexible by default, so you're going to have this kind of pattern, right? But when you do flex colon, you're going to have this different pattern, and I'm going to show you how that works. So you're going to basically have this. So I'm going to just grab this and put it here. This flex column, and this is flex. So why I'm doing all of this is because of the emails I got. I think they basically needed to understand how the layout system works, right? So that's why I'm actually coming back to the basics to explain all of this. So when you do flex and flex row, you're going to have this pattern. When you do a flex column, you're going to have this pattern. So for you to to basically use the responsive pointers in Tailwind to basically achieve a responsive layout, you can use a combination of medium. These are our pointers, large and extra large. Right, so you can now use a combination of these pointers to make, to switch from one layout to another, right? So I hope this makes sense, right? So I think I'm trying very hard to explain this, right? So this pointers allows you to make it responsive. So if, for example, in the medium device, you want it to be flex row, you can do medium flex row. And if it's in the large device, you want it to be flex colon, you can do that, right? So Tailwind has cool utility pointers, responsive pointers that you can use to basically make your layout as responsive as possible. So back to the application. So we're going to come in here, and there we go. So we just basically have text, and then we have in different sections where we show the progress bar. So you can see the progress bar is in here, and this is how it is. You can see it has a background color and actual color of the progress. So yeah, this is how you basically work with it. And yeah, similar thing happens in the services part, right? So you go to services. This is actually all the data we have. Okay, so you can see here we have UI UX, we have the description, which is pretty much the same. And then we have the icon URL. So the icon URL is what you have on top, right? So all these ones on top are obviously the icons, and you can use them, wherever you want. So you can see where we're actually looping through them, and we're able to, properly destructure this by putting it in the service card in the cards component. So you can see right here. So service card, on the other hand, just basically have, what does it have? The icon, the title, and description. That's all right here. So it's very easy for you to follow that up. Okay, so that's for the service section. We have the my project section. So my project section on the other hand, so we had to leverage Shadcn tabs component, right? So Shadcn basically has a tab component right here. So I'm going to open it up. Okay, tabs. Maybe I'll just refresh it. Okay, so I think this could be a network issue. But while we wait for that to load, I could just continue. So you basically have to install it, and you're going to have access to all of these components. And what you do when you come here, this is the way you basically instantiate it. It's very straightforward. You can find it in the documentation, right? So these are the different sections we have. We have the all, we have the UI UX, we have the web, we have the app, and we have the graphic. So okay, still loading for some weird reason. Oh, it's fine. Let's go back. So on the graphic, so when you switch between each of them, you can be able to, understand what's just going to switch and so on. So how we're able to achieve that is that, each tab list basically has a content, right? So the tab content specify the value. So the value here is the same value specified within it has a prop to your tabs trigger. So if it's all, that means it's going to render this content. So what I've done, I've created some sort of, array an object basically that contains a different array of different stuffs. So this is for all. So for all, we're going to have this, and this. So for the web, we're going to have these 3 entries, and for the app, those 3 entries. UI, just a single entry, and graphics, just a single entry. Right. So this gives us a proper landing. And this is how I was able to, basically just start it from all to UI to web, app, and graphic. And meanwhile, whenever you make a loop, do not forget to include your index, your key. So your key is always a unique identifier for React. So basically tell React that, oh, this is the key of this particular object, right? So because others have been mapped to the DOM, to the virtual DOM, and you need to have appropriate keys for this virtual DOM to be able to identify each of this element. So it has to be put there all the time. Okay, so and finally, I think, no, not finally, we have in this later section. This is very easy. We are using the input as well as the button. So we already have this button created. You just have to import it and put the name and specify the width you are interested in. Okay, so now and finally, so we have the footers section. So footers is very straightforward. I'm going to scroll all the way down. So we just have the logo here. We have a bunch of lists, and then we have the social media icons and so on. So this is the way we go about that, right? So we have, first of all, the logo. This is the logo here. And then we have the link, the list of the links. This is the links. So I just loop through them and route them. So you can route them to any link you want. And then we have the list of your social icons, right? And also we have the last copyright text. So yeah, so I think with this we've really covered the entire application. So the goal was to make it as short as possible. I didn't want to make this lesson quite long because there are lots of other stuff coming up, right? So I needed to rush through this for you guys to get the point. And Also, yeah, so I think with this, we can basically come to the application. So what you want to do is to try to build it. I'm just going to create a new window and try to build. So I think we're using npm. So it's good to stick with one node manager and not use double. So this is going to try to build the actual application. So while it's building, we're at the process of deploying it now. And I want to basically open up Vercel, right? Okay, so this is Vercel. I want to create, all you basically need to do is to create a new project. So wait for it to load up. And this is the project we want to deploy. Before we do that, let's make sure that it's still built successfully. I think it will build successfully though. So we're going to just import it. I'm just going to deploy. I don't have any environment variables or configuration. So it's a one-click deployment. So it's deploying now. And it's still building here. So let's see which is faster. All right, so let's check on our build. Okay, still building. So open this up. Okay, yes, configuration JSON is invalid. Okay, are we good? Is it working? Oh, that means it's done. So let's go. Continue to dashboard. Okay, as you can see, we will have this deployed now. And we can just click on the link. Let's see what we have. Boom, there we go. So we see, our application now live. And yeah, extremely responsive as well. Right, so I think with this, we can actually safely conclude that we've come to the end of this lesson.